What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? Flavor Flav ate at the restaurant I work at once. He made a huge deal about having to sit somewhere private because he didn't want any attention. When it came to pay his bill, he tried to pay with a prepaid Visa that did not have enough money on it. Sounds pretty on brand. My only experience with Guy Fieri thus far was cordial. Did a guest presentation for us and took plenty of photos. But every time there's a wildfire or other depressing thing going on around here, he has his second responder crew ready to feed and care for all the first responders. This needs to be higher up. People like to make fun of his persona, but he uses what he has to truly help others. Samuel L. Jackson at the Calgary Stampede in Canada. He was super nice. My family went up for it because my uncle is part of the committee that organizes the Stampede every year and he got us VIP seating. I was a kid at the time and I was like, does your wallet really say OBAMF? He laughed and said he left that one at home. Of course, when I told the story at school I told everyone his wallet did in fact say that. All of these were waiting tables. Waited on Gene Wilder for his birthday years ago. He was incredibly nice and laughed so hard he cried when I told him we had everlasting pistachio ice cream. Betty White was hilarious and tipsy after wine and would not stop flirting. If I had been 60 years older, NPH was also gracious as humanly possibly, insisted we have a drink with his table while we waited on him, and tipped like a champ. Seth MacFarlane was amazing, drew me an original cartoon and signed it there at the table. After paying and tipping 100%, he refused to let me buy him a shot of whiskey and instead bought me one, then invited us to meet him out later. Sounds like your experience with Betty was golden. I met Vin Diesel at a truck stop diner when I was a kid. It was like 4 in the morning and me, my grandpa and Vin and his friend were the only ones in the diner, and we ended up getting sat at the table next to them. Vin and a friend were getting ready to go on some fishing trip which was made obvious by the clothes they were wearing. My grandpa struck up a conversation about fishing with him, completely oblivious to who he was. He was a really nice guy and apparently knew a great deal about fishing techniques. I was a bit geeked out and didn't say much or contribute to the conversation, but I spent the next hour of our road trip explaining to my grandpa who Vin Diesel was and why it was a huge deal we just met him. I bet for Vin it was probably refreshing to have a casual conversation with someone about a personal hobby that didn't center around his celebrity status. Met Dave Chappelle a few years back. Long story short, a friend of a friend got me and 2 friends into an after party. We were sitting at the bar when his manager offered us some shots. We talked with his manager for a while. Then Dave sat down near us. Dave was kind of sitting by himself and he looks over at us and goes, "What's going on, fellas?" And we talked to him for about an hour. We thanked him for coming to our town. Talked about music, sports, all kinds of stuff. Super cool dude. One of my favorite memories. My husband and I were wandering around Philly a few years ago and Don Cheadle was walking toward us. We both stopped and turned as we watched him go by. After he passed us, he turned around with a big smile and winked. I just thought that was pretty cool. I served Daniel Radcliffe his dessert at an event and tripped and spilled some of it on him, probably due to seeing that I was serving Daniel Radcliffe. And he stood up and started apologizing profusely to me. Was very sweet and asking if I was okay. The correct British response, I like how fame never seemed to give him a big head. When I was a teenager, I met Neil Armstrong at a retirement ceremony that my dad brought me to. It was at a museum and it was a private event. There was time for everyone to wander the museum, and my dad saw Mr. Armstrong looking at one of the planes that my dad helped design. Nobody else around. They struck up a conversation and Neil asked me questions about what I was studying and how I felt about the work my dad did. My dad worked on classified planes when I was much younger. He seemed like such a gentle guy to me. A bunch of other men suddenly joined us and started asking him for autographs, which he declined. It seemed to snap him out of his happy mood, and he kind of shut down and walked away. At that time I thought he was a bit of a jerk for not saying goodbye or anything, but I recently read about the hard time he had with fame, and I guess it makes sense. Sounds like he's really nice, but overwhelmed with the accidental stardom. I don't blame him. I'd be the same way after years of that. My mom and sister met The Rock when he was still a wrestler. They had a couple car seats and tons of bags, having a heck of a time getting off the plane, and people were waiting, and then this massive guy offered to carry some things for them and they happily took the help. He grabbed some bags and held the baby carrier with my niece in it and helped them off the plane and left. After people kept going up to them asking how they knew The Rock, and they were very confused until someone explained who he was. Bumped into Gordon Ramsay in the lift in a hotel in Hong Kong. He was very friendly. We didn't talk to him or ask for a picture. I just blurted out, "You're Gordon Ramsay," and he acknowledged and smiled. He insisted on us going first because we had our suitcases with us. Wished us a nice day, said bye several times when we saw him in the lobby again. Very friendly. Got the chance to meet him a few years back and he really is a pretty nice guy. Just has a low tolerance for bulls. I was working on a set once where John C. Reilly acted as one of the main characters. It was a pretty small set and low budget. Not even sure if the show ever aired. So we all found ourselves working closely together for the most part. I sat across from him during lunch one day and we chatted for a bit about random stuff. The guy talks the same way he acts, which is why I think he plays such a great character in any comedy, because he quite literally plays his own attitude in many roles. At least it seems. But anyway, he was a very nice and down-to-earth guy. I found it hard not to giggle every time he spoke because I just couldn't shake the image in my head of all the roles he's played. A few years ago, Helen Mirren came to my job. I worked as a weekend hostess at a Ukrainian diner in Nixie East Village, and very famous for its peerages. I didn't know who Helen Mirren was at the time, and as it was a busy Saturday brunch, I asked for her name, put it on the wait list and let her know it would be 20 minutes. She just stood off to the side and talked with her two other companions. Never bothered me, never demanded to be seated sooner, never brought up her celebrity status. Customers kept coming up and asked if that was the Helen Mirren. My boss eventually made me seat her before everyone else. Helen looked at her watch and remarked it hadn't been 20 minutes. All in all, Helen Mirren 10/10 lovely person. I met John Candy on a plane when I was a little kid while traveling with my family. He was a big man. He had the whole row to himself in front of us with the armrest up between seats so he could be more comfortable. The stewardesses were blocking anyone from coming up and bothering him, even though they themselves were not exactly leaving him alone, what with talking to him constantly and laughing at his enjoyable banter the whole trip. At some point he got up to go to the bathroom. When he came back he looked at me, pretended to do a double take like he was surprised and said, "Hey, you're the quietest kid ever. Don't you talk." The way he said it was so friendly that I just smiled and giggled. Then he had a pleasant conversation with my parents, who had been dying to talk to him the entire flight, but were too polite to bother him. Not even 2 weeks later we heard he had passed. I met a few celebs working as an event photographer for fundraisers from time to time. Chevy Chase. Well, the stories are true. He was a huge jerk. Jamie Lee Curtis was one of the sweetest people I've ever met, bar none, and easily the nicest celeb I met working the camera. Very considerate and thoughtful person. She kept checking with us to see if she could do anything for us or if we needed any more shots she could help with. Great sense of humor too. Jamie Lee Curtis seems to do a good job remembering her extras. They did a bit on James Corden's show and she picked out the lady that did a scene with her several years ago. Met Colin Mockery at some obscure convention in my city. He actually talked to us for a few minutes and I basically just fangirled about Whose Line and Royal Canadian Air Force. Really great guy. He has my absolute respect. I ran into Adam Sandler outside of a Planet Fitness in Brooklyn in early 2016. As I was leaving the Planet Fitness, it looked like he was walking in. We made eye contact, so I stopped and held the door for him. He got to the door and stopped right before he walked through, in one of those fake poses that little kids make when you tell them to freeze. I stood there holding the door, plenty confused, for about 5 seconds. We just stood there, him, motionless, and I, standing there holding the door. Finally, he turned his head and said in the stereotypical Adam Sandler voice, "Who we kidding? I'm not going in there," giant grin on his face. We both laughed and then he continued down the street. Awesome. He was in my town in NY shooting something for Netflix a few years ago. When he was done for the day he went down to the local park and started playing pickup games of basketball with people. My mom spotted Robin Williams once and she went up to him and asked if she could get a quick photo. She didn't realize he was there in the middle or about to do something with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, so she waited until they were done around 20-30 minutes later, and then a bunch of the kids and people wanted photos with him. He made it a point to stick around and told his staff I think that woman wanted a photo and made sure she got it. Mom was thrilled. He was such a humble, nice dude. I had a chance to work with Whitney Houston for 8 days on a film set. I was working as an extra. She was nice, kind and personable. Her beauty was more striking in person. She was very professional. She did not miss a mark or a cue. Everybody on the set cried when she sang. Whitney Houston was very nice to me and complimentary. She spoke sweetly and in a motherly tone when she greeted people. I can still remember her friendly greetings when she arrived on set every day. That was one of best experiences of my life and best experiences working on a film set. I learned a lot from her about professionalism on a film set. I also saw how hard she worked. She was there 12 hours a day and on point every minute. I watched how she interacted with the director, other actors and crew. She was even encouraging to other actors and performers in the film, even the extras. It was heartbreaking when she passed. I still have the dress that I wore in that film. She admired and complimented me about the dress. An actor musician I know was booked to perform at the event Whitney Houston was to be at the day she passed. He was also staying at the same hotel. He called me and told me she was gone and he started to cry. Every time I see one of her videos I think what a shame it is that she's gone. What a superstar. For a couple years I went to a private school in Connecticut. My last year there, Bill Murray's sons transferred in. Neither was in my grade, but one of them was in the play with me. I was super nervous, but I was an SNL fan my whole life and had the 20th anniversary book that talked about all the cast members and behind the scenes stuff. After the show I, really shyly, said hi and told him I was a fan and asked him to sign it. He said, "Whoa, I haven't even seen this yet." Cool, and then told the biggest lie ever told and said I was good in the show. I was awful. I forgot all my lines. Weirdly, this wasn't the first time I saw him. When I was about 6 we were at a restaurant in New Jersey and he and his wife were at another table. Ghostbusters had just come out and I wanted to say hi but my parents stopped me. Nice dude. Jamie Lee Curtis. I worked with special needs young adults and was with a client at the mess stop. A woman walked in with a teenager and they were shopping around. We were the only customers there and when she asked for help from an associate I loved the way she spoke. I went to ask her where she was from and stopped before blurting out, "Wow, has anyone told you that you look exactly like Jamie Lee Curtis?" To which she smiled and replied, "That's because I am her." I apologized and let her get back to her shopping. Afterward, as she was about to leave, I asked her if it would be alright if I called my wife and told her where it was I ran into her. I didn't know if she wanted her location blasted, and she said of course. Want to take a picture? Absolute solid human. Loved her. When my dad was about 9, 1964ish, he was on a plane from La to Heathrow in coach with his mom. The stewardess came back and excitedly asked him if he wanted to meet a Beatle. My dad said sure but didn't really know the Beatles at that age, and only said yes because that's kinda what you do at that age. He sat on the couch next to George. Different time. Airlines treated you like people. George folds up his newspaper and says, "So, do ya like my music?" My dad says, like a confused 10-year-old, no. Apparently George smiled and went back to reading his newspaper. My dad sat there like a doofus for like 5-10 minutes until the stewardess came and got him. So George Harrison was cool to children, and my dad's the most stone cold 10-year-old ever. Oh my gosh, George is my favorite person ever. So nice to find a story about him. Thanks for sharing. Years ago, working hotel security in Edmonton, I was escorting Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers at 0400 in the elevator down from their rooms to the lobby to get in their airport limo. I am 6 feet 5 inches, and so I towered over her. Dolly looked me up and down and said in her cute southern drawl, "They sure grow 'em big up here in Canada." She was just as sweet as you could imagine. Kenny, on the other hand, and I feel bad for saying this, due to his recent passing, treated me like the help, which I of course was, and even made a huffy impatient noise when, slightly flustered by Dolly's remark, I struggled to find the key to put the elevator into independent service. Dolly touched my arm, looked me in the eye, and said, "Darling, don't you pay him any attention. We appreciate you all." I guess I got the good and the bad in one shot. Jesus, Dolly has got to be one of the most wholesome people to ever walk the earth. I met Paul Rudd on a flight from NY, sat next to him on the plane. My buddy leaned over and told me that he wanted to compliment him on this band shirt he wore when making Clueless, but he didn't want it to be weird, so his solution was to write him a note and slip it to him. Lol. So he does this, and Paul just gets this nervous look on his face, opens the note and reads it, starts cracking up laughing, leaned over to us and said, "Best note ever." He then told us the whole story of the shirt, how he fought with the costume Depp about it because it was the shirt he wore to set that day. We talked the whole flight. Dude was super cool. Edit. Band is Trip Shakespeare. Oh, this makes me so happy. I saw his name and almost didn't read on because I'd be so upset if he wasn't nice. After college, I was living the intern life in New York, so I had to hunt around for a job that would be fine with me working just evenings. The first call I got was Kmart, so for about a month, I worked at Kmart Penn Station. One night, this guy with his hat pulled down low and this really cheerful girl came into the electronics department where I worked. It was a wild store with tons of sketchy characters, so right away I was wary of him. Anyhow, they looked at the game selection for a minute, then the girl asked me if they could get Madden 2013. I obliged, took it from the case and began cashing them out. It was over the $50 minimum where I had to ask for it with a credit card purchase, so I asked the sketchy fella for his ID. He told me, in this hushed little voice, that he didn't have it with him. MHM. So I called up security to get the okay to finish up the transaction. As I'm talking to them, he tilts the credit card towards me. My first thought is, I didn't know JP Morgan made a credit card, and then I looked at the name, Daniel Radcliffe. His girlfriend was beaming at me as the expected recognition washed over my dumb, tired face. He was super gracious, and my height, which I loved even more. We're both a firm 5 feet 5 inches, and I was pleased to be so calm and collected about the whole thing that they both got out of there without anyone else knowing who he was. The Kmart in Penn Station is also sketchy, but it was so big. I'm from a medium-sized city in Texas, so it was crazy to see all the stuff they had, plus the Walgreens also located there. Man, it was something else. Met Jake Gyllenhaal at stage door after his play off Broadway last February. I was super nervous BC he's my favorite actor and had heard stories of him not being nice. We said hi, and as he was signing my playbill, a lady shoved in front of me and demanded he sign her playbills for her daughters and that she just has to get a photo. He looked so uncomfortable and kept looking back at me, but he signed them anyway. I am only 5 feet 3 and was 17, so I just let it happen because I hate confrontation and was a little starstruck by Jake. Well, he told her off and said, "You're going to have to wait because I'm going to spend some time talking to her," points to me because you cut her off. He then turned so he was fully looking at me and he apologized to me for her behavior. I just about died. We had a short conversation about his work. I thanked him profusely, and we took a photo. I have so much respect for him for handling the situation so well, and all of my nervousness completely evaporated. What's funny is that other lady will probably go on to tell people he's a dong, even though he responded to her crappy behavior appropriately. Maybe that's where the bad stories come from. Entitled Buttholes, You're Treated as Such. Ewan McGregor accidentally ran over my BF's foot a couple of years ago when he was filming his Long Way Round series. He was absolutely lovely though. My BF loves bikes, so he was over the moon, bless him. Apparently they talked about his GS for a couple of minutes together. Apparently it's one of his favorite memories. He had to restrain himself a little from roasting the GS as they are notorious for their unreliability. Loved that series, and the sequel Long Way Down. Apparently they finished Long Way Up in December, with electric hollies. Tom Hiddleston told me my dog was awesome, so that was the highlight of my life, lol. I am eternally jealous of this exact interaction. Met Matthew Lillard, his wife, and newborn daughter like literally after the release of the first Scooby-Doo movie. My family always host 4th of July parties in our beach house, and he party crashed. I was like 7 or 8 at the time and my cousins were freaking out saying Shaggy is here. Of course I immediately sprinted over and he was eating a hot dog, Super cliche I know since it's the 4th of July lol. He was so cool. The whole time he was in character and offering me to have him go get a hot dog for me. I remember my little cousins asking where Scooby was at and he replied, "Oh, Scoobs ate so many hot dogs that he's like having a food coma." Seriously, one of most highlighted memory dating back to my youth. That's phenomenal. By all accounts he's a good dude. I met the Saint Bernard dog from Beethoven at Planet Hollywood when I was a kid. Seemed like a pretty nice dog in person. I hope you got to give him pets. Met Peter Cullen, voice of Optimus Prime and EIO, at BotCon in 2012. They had a raffle system set up for autographs meet and greets. He saw a bunch of us standing off to the side, including a man next to me who was sobbing because Peter meant so much to him. Peter full on ran from the line he was supposed to be autographing and bear hugged this guy for at least a solid minute, patting his back and saying it's alright, everything is okay, I'm here now, while the guy sobbed on him. Then Peter autographed all our memorabilia and was whisked away by some very angry con staff. Wonderful, wonderful man. Class act and genuinely kind. My grandma sat next to Rob Van Winkle, Vanilla Ice, on a plane before he was famous for Ice Ice Baby. She knew who he was but didn't want him to know. They had a lovely 4 hours conversation and she said he was really intelligent and nice. Grandma got to talk to Ice Ice Baby. I met Kiefer Sutherland after one of his gigs and he was the most humble celeb I've ever met, so genuine and nice. He took pictures with everyone and signed everything. There was about 15 people. He even had a chat with us all and thanked us for waiting for him while he was doing a radio interview. I met the Wiggles at a country pub in Australia and they are very cool blokes. This is great. My kids loved the Wiggles when they were young. David Bowie was extremely nice. I worked on his production of Lazarus and Nick before he passed and was no older than 20 at the time, considerably younger than most on the crew. He took time out of talking to the director to turn to me and tell me that I was doing a phenomenal job on the production. It meant the world to me that he would do that for the shy, unsure 20-year-old. Totally made my life. Used to do delivery runs for a catering company, and we would get a lot of celebrities at the airport that ordered from us. Johnny Depp was the only one I ever saw face to face. Dude pulled a wadded up bill from his pocket and tossed it at me. I thought it was cool I got a tip directly from him at all, but once I had it all unwadded it was $100 bill. He's really a total sweetheart. I saw him at a few shows. He plays guitar with Alice Cooper, and after the set ended he leaned down from the stage to give me a hug, smiling the whole time. I greeted him with Captain Jack and he laughed, even though I was just a kid. Nicest dude. I noticed Ron Perlman while I was stocking veggies at Whole Foods. I met his eye and he asked me where the bell peppers were. I showed him and afterwards I asked, "Are you an actor?" So he paused and looked at me with a friendly smirk and said, "Sometimes." I smiled and nodded. I decided to roll with it and drop the subject. He seemed to appreciate it and approached me again with another produce question a couple of weeks later. Seemed like a good dude with a pleasant vibe. Snoop Dogg. Totally, unflappably chill, 100% of the time. It's like a superpower. John Bon Jovi. Smoked a cigarette with him. Couldn't have been more down to earth. I believe he's making barbecue sandwiches for homeless people as we speak. Otto. Jeremy Piven. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Must have been method acting for the Ari Gold role. Nearly 20 years ago, I literally bumped into Mick Foley at Six Flags in NJ. I was walking backwards down the exit ramp from a ride while talking to some friends, and he was being escorted up the exit ramp with his kids to skip the line. My dumbass never saw him coming, and I backed right up into him. Dude was super cool about. He just caught me, gave me a pat on the back when I apologized and said, "No problem dude, have a nice day," and then I realized who it was as he was walking away. My jaw dropped and one of my buddies just looked at me and said, "Did mankind just tell you to have a nice day? Where is you? Shut him off when you need him." Met Linkin Park at Ozfest 01 in Dallas. I was 11 walking by their booth with a long butt line. Chester and Mike seen a kid, me, told me to jump the railing, gave me a bunch of free crap they signed, told me they were glad to see a new generation coming to concerts and listening to rock. Was one heck of an experience. Too bad I was young and didn't take care of the crap they gave me. Stephen Fry was absolutely delightful, charming, chatty, got my name wrong once at the beginning of the evening and kept apologizing for it over the course of the night. Katie Price was an absolute bollocking C. Seemed to believe she ranked just under the Queen in social standing. In actuality she ranks just under the drummer and the third best Queen cover band in Slough. Seemed to believe she ranked just under the Queen in social standing. In actuality she ranks just under the drummer and the third best Queen cover band in Slough. Haha, fantastic. Stephen Fry's a genuine national treasure. Ringo Starr likes this restaurant by my house. I have run into him a few times while I'm up there. If he's with someone else then he's bearable. There is thus one time though, I was with a friend and he exited the restaurant with his wife. My friend saw who he was and looked shocked. He just looked in our direction and said, "Yes it is I," and drove off. We were then informed by the valet guy a few feet away that we got the lucky end because some older folks were nearby. In short, Ringo is a salty man. Yes it is I. That's actually a pretty epic way to greet people. Terry Pratchett was as quirky and fun in real life as his books were. His passing was a huge loss to me as we'd met several times in person and had multiple conversations online. Felt like I'd lost a friend. We met Robin Williams at Universal Studios when my wife's grandmother was still alive. She said hello to him and hoped his family was having a good time. He tipped his hat to her and said thank you kindly, Mom. She talked about that encounter the rest of her days. In real life he was super short as well. And, finally, Tim Hunkin, who you've probably never heard of, but he did a popular TV show in the 90s called The Secret Life of Machines. I sent him an email thanking him for helping me become interested in electronics and I got a very kind reply back. My mom would have killed to have Pratchett's number or whatever. She's a massive fan and was heartbroken when he died. I met Miss Dolly Parton when I was just a wee kid in Illinois. I've described it as being like meeting the sun. She was just so happy and warm and wonderful, and she was the first person I'd met in real life with a southern accent. I love that I have only heard positive things about her. As a lifelong fan, she's an angel. Worked on a music video with both Pee Wee Herman and Karen Gillan. Pee Wee was super dickish and demanding and made the producers' lives heck the whole time, and I only saw him when he was needed on set. Had to be driven to and from his AC dressing room 30 minutes to film site. Complained the whole time. Had his own catering. Showed up late. Karen was super chill. Ate with the crew. Answered questions about Doctor Who and Marvel. Did costume changes in a pass van. And was generally down to earth and charming. Also very tall. Wasn't expecting that. I have a hard time with super attractive women already, and her towering over people really added to that. I'm so glad that Karen was nice because she just seems like a gem in everything I've seen her in. Interviews, Instagram etc. Zac Efron is the nicest guy in the world. I met him at a New Year's house party in La. I asked him about his workout regime for Neighbors and he was so happy to talk to me. I honestly felt so comfortable talking to him I could have asked him to get me a drink at the bar and I think he would have done it. In the end I told him he was the nicest celebrity I have ever met. He looked at me and said, "Hey man, real recognizes real." Yeah no. Gabriella met him at a New Year's Eve party too. Could have been the start of something new for you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.